Hey, team players, today is starting fantasy section, fantasy world here at Local Football Flavor. And the way that we're going to break down our shows to help it make sense is we're going to go from ESPN's current list as of June 3rd for the top 200 players, PPR leagues, single quarterback. And what we're going to do is just break them down in 10 people chunks. So at the end of the day, there's going to be times, especially when we get to like the 50s or so, where I feel that there's going to be some players that should be in the 30s. It's not going to matter. We're just ranking them based on these 10 players for this episode and to break it down, Bob. So as you guys can see on the screen, ESPN has ranked them McCaffrey number 1, J. Jeff number 2, Ekeler 3, Saquon 4, Chase 5, Taylor 6, Kelce 7. I know how you love those tight ends early, Bob. Josh Jacobs, Cooper Kupp, and Bijan Robinson. So, Bob, where do you want to start with there? Is there anyone obviously saying too high, too low as we look at the initial top 10?
So as we look at this initial top 10, what really strikes me is that Travis Kelce is in the top 10. And typically speaking, I do like Travis Kelce a lot here. And I think that there is a lot that you can say in terms of value provided per position. So if you take Travis Kelce in the top 10 and he's your first round pick, you are obviously going to get a commanding lead at the tight end position for all intents and purposes, because Travis Kelce has been the highest scoring tight end or one of the top 2 highest scoring tight ends for a couple of years now. And so you are definitely getting positional supremacy. And that's really important when we go from a week-to-week basis where I don't have to worry about streaming guys like Hayden Hurst, and I don't have to worry about streaming guys in like TJ Hawkinson. Well, here's where that kind of falls apart a little bit and where I really don't like Travis Kelce in the top 10. There's a lot of players that are really good players that you could take in this top 10. And there are players here from 11 through 20 that are even a little bit viable as well in guys like Derrick Henry or Tyreek Hill. And so when you go out there and you take Travis Kelce, you're saying, I'm going to sacrifice a running back or a wide receiver. Now, you have to ask yourself, is that worth it in the long run? And I'm in the vein of saying that it might be, but it's really hard to justify it in a lot of different ways.
Yeah, and as I look at this, disclosure, guys, I'm a running backs guy. And the reason I'm a running backs guy is because there's a very limited amount of them out there that are their lead dog. Now, there are some of them that we're not going to see on the ESPN list until much further down. And I think when a push comes to shove, we'll get some re-rankings as a result of this. But when I look at the running back world, this is the problem I have with McCaffrey, Bob, is he's obviously the main stud in San Francisco, but they pull him back. And we know how weak the NFC is. And San Francisco is going to have themselves 4 division games a year where he's only playing half the game. When they're playing, they're going to be the favorite in 75% of their games. We know that before it even starts. And do you want a guy who's going to have limited shares of the ball? Likewise, it's the conversation with Ekeler. The one who I think should be number 1 that is of disagreement to a lot of people is actually Saquon. They built that entire team around Saquon. They have no receivers, and it's pretty obvious. When we did our episode, it was blatantly called, it's all about Saquon. And it's a line that got better. It's a line that showed they're willing to run the ball. And even when they lose, they give Saquon the ball. So to me, I look at Saquon and to a degree Taylor in that same vein, because if we're looking for running backs that we know are getting the rock with no competition, they are them. You know, obviously the Colts have a little bit of a better receiving core because they don't get hurt every 10 minutes. But still, it's going to be either the Mississippi Mudflap or a rookie. They're going to rely upon a running game. And when I look at that, I go, okay, cool. But to the Kelce point, I think that you have two elements with Kelce going this year. First, we don't have any real receivers on the Chiefs. I mean, there's just not. I mean, maybe Sky Moore steps up. Maybe the one from the Giants, who I don't think is smart, steps up.
They could get DeAndre Hopkins, though.
That would be crazy. But regardless, that's the argument for Kelce's share. There's no one there. But the Chiefs have told you this whole offseason they're changing their offense to a degree, and they're running the ball a lot harder.
So here's to the point that you made about Saquon Barkley and to the point that you make about Travis Kelce is that in my mind, these two players for your team are shining examples of players that are going to be used regardless of the situation.
Yeah.
Travis Kelce is going to be used regardless of if the Chiefs are winning or not. If you look at his points, PPR points last year, he had 316 total points in a PPR league.
Nice.
Now, those stats are based off of numbers that you can see on Fantasy Pro. So it's a standard probably 1 point per reception here.
Yeah.
316 points. That is 100 points better than the next tight end. When you look at what Saquon did in a PPR league, he's number 5.
Yeah.
And that is with a share of snaps. When you look at how many snaps that he accumulated over the course of the year, as the season went on, his snaps, there are games where he's at 30%. Then the next game he's at 79, 30%, 85. Now, what we have to say about the Giants is, yes, they are a running first organization. They're a running first team here. And we think that the Giants aren't going to necessarily perform to the expectations that they set up for themselves last year. And if we're getting a 284 point season from Saquon last year, I can see those numbers coming back down a little bit because he had a ton of carries.
I see the other direction. I think he's going up.
But that means that his carries are going to have to go up. And last year they were tremendously high already.
Yes, true.
And so this is a guy that's coming.
I think his catches are going up.
Well, that could be too, because when you look at how many catches he had, how many targets he had, I mean, he's being targeted. There was only one game where he was targeted more than double-digit times.
Yeah.
And so, if Saquon can get to the point where, okay, yes, he is out of the injury concern range. This goes same with Christian McCaffrey as well. And when these guys move fully out of this range, I think it's a very good discussion to have is, do I take Christian McCaffrey 1 or do I take Saquon Barkley number 1? Because in my mind, those two players are the players that you do want to take early, regardless of if they get injured or not. The potential explosion that these two players provide is immeasurable to your team. So you come and you look at and you say, okay, what's the stats look like here? Well, 356 points in a PPR league for Christian McCaffrey, and that's even with him having games where he had 1, 2, 3. Carolina. No, that's even games where he had 4 games under or 5 games under 20 points, maybe even 6 games under 20 points. So you are getting a tremendous opportunity for explosion. Now,
you are.
Where this discussion comes in for Austin Ekeler is that last year Austin Ekeler had a great. So when you look at weeks where he exploded, so let's look at week 7. Week 7, he had 36 points in a PPR league. Week 7, he also had 12 receptions. So you're looking at that in that game specifically, the opportunity for him to rise up as a wide receiver.
Well, that's the risk with Ekeler, because we remember last year, both of the main receivers in the Chargers went down throughout basically the entire year. At least one of them was out, and Ekeler kind of by default became their number 2. And just as I don't think you should bank on someone going down, so I do think that Saquon and McCaffrey are out of the injury risk. So much of Eckler's juice as you're going through here is weeks when particularly Allen, but also Williams wasn't playing. And Ekeler was able to do essentially the possession receiver type role, because the way they use Josh Palmer, who's one of my secret gems that I love, they use him to push the ball. So when I look at this, I think that Ekeler is overrated as a result of him having an injury-fed year as a result of Keenan Allen going down. And with the Chargers making the worst real-life first-round draft pick of taking a receiver, that even increases the likelihood of Eckler's bubble to pop, probably more so than anyone's. You made a very good argument about why Saquon Barkley's bubble could pop, and there's something true there. But when we look at this and say, who do you want as the safe value that bubble ain't popping?
Mm-hmm.
Those top 2 receivers aren't going anywhere.
No.
Jefferson is getting the ball thrown his way unless it's the fourth quarter of a playoff game.
Mm-hmm.
And even Cincinnati, for as stupid as they've been my entire life, realize give the ball to Chase and things are good. So if you want a safe value, you can't go wrong with Jeff or Chase.
Yeah, and I want to go back to Austin Ekeler for a moment for the people that really like Austin Ekeler. Now, the games where he's really popping off, week 4 at Houston, right? Popping off against the Rams late in the season. The games where people are getting hurt. So he's feasting as you want your star player to do. He's feasting on guys and on teams that you should. And that's really,
they have a much harder schedule this year.
That's really important to note. And that's the point that I'm getting to here.
Yeah.
When you look at the Chargers' schedule this year,
they're playing
they're not playing cupcakes.
Yeah, they're playing the AFC East.
They're playing teams that this is going to be a tough schedule for them because these teams have gotten all of these teams in some degree have improved in some way. Despite Joe not liking the Dolphins defense could definitely stop Austin Ekeler. The Vikings defense has a lot of players that we talked about that we're not really
They got Flores. The Vikings defense got Flores. There's value there.
Flores is their coach. Titans are going to have a stronger defense too. Cowboys. Raiders, hopefully they can do something. The Bears defense improved just slightly. The Jets
He'll
defense
feast on the Bears. He will feast on the Bears.
The Lions defense improved. The Ravens defense. The Packers defense has all those number 1 picks like we talked about. The Broncos defense we like. The Patriots defense we like. So in order for Austin Ekeler, I think, to find the success. Now, I'm not saying that Austin Ekeler is not going to have weeks where he's going to pop off for like 25 points. But I think that those weeks are going to come fewer and farther between, that I wouldn't want to take him as the number 1 pick, because realistically, the 4 guys that you're even considering at number 1 are McCaffrey, Jefferson, Ekeler, and Barkley. Those are the top 4. You're considering them all at number 1 for some reason or another. You take who you like ultimately. That's what you have to say. You take who you like ultimately. But out of all of those players, the guy that seems to be the safest, like you said, is Justin Jefferson.
Yeah, it's hard to fight J. Jeff.
You take a look at his receptions over the course of the year. He had 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 games below 10 receptions. And in a PPR league, that's an automatic 10 points.
Yes.
You look at Chase, and now Chase had games where he was out. So
Chase got hurt, but
his is even better.
Well, so here's the thing, and I think that this goes to your schedule point before. In both conferences, the East and the West are playing each other, and the North and the South are playing each other. It's kind of cool that they did it like that. And I would say in both conferences, the South is the worst overall, top to bottom. And you can make an argument that the East is the best top to bottom division strength. That's why, to me, I give an emphasis to both the NFC and AFC North, except for the studs in the South, like Bijan. So I think that argument of saying, look there's not a defense in the NFC North that can stop Jefferson. There's not, and there certainly ain't one in the South. We did those episodes.
Detroit's trying.
Detroit will always be trying.
trying.
And they're gonna bite your knees, man. But they still ain't stopping him. Detroit's built to win games 35-34, and that leads to a lot of fantasy points. So Bob, for the sake of as we're wrapping up this episode, why don't we give each of us how we would rank these 10, and then we'll be able to go from there.
So I think personally, this would be my rankings. And I know we didn't talk about Cooper Kupp. I know we didn't talk about Bijan Robinson.
We didn't.
Cooper Kupp is, it's going to be interesting how he comes back because he was the number one player a couple of years ago.
Sure was.
And the Rams really haven't gotten any better. And so the question marks are still out about that. But when he comes back, he is Stafford's favorite target. So, we didn't talk about Josh Jacobs. Josh Jacobs, I think, is the one that I wouldn't include in the top 10 here. I'm not big on the Raiders at all. And I know that Josh Jacobs had an incredible season last year. And I know that that's, something that could definitely happen again, and his share of the targets and his share of the snap count It was all there. It's all there to tell you that it could happen again this year. I am just not willing to, if I'm at the back half of that first round where he's going to get taken, I'm going to consider him, but I'm also going to try to consider some guys that are in that 11 and 12 range as well, and try to double dip on a couple of those. So as far as these rankings go here, I'm definitely Christian McCaffrey number 1, Justin Jefferson number 2, Jamar Chase number 3, Barkley 4, Ekeler 5. I do like Travis Kelce in the 6th hole just because of his sheer dominance at the position.
Hard to fight it.
Over the only guy that could compete with him was Andrews or a healthy Kittle, and even then,
they want to throw the ball more in Baltimore, Bob.
Even then, that's pretty tricky.
That is so
funny. So 7 would be a resurgent Cooper Kupp if that were an opportunity. We like the Colts this year. I think Taylor at 8 I think that's a steal.
Oh yeah.
Bijan at 9 for me. There's a lot of question marks on what his share of the snap count will be in Atlanta.
That's the only question we have, though.
But I think we're going to be pleasantly surprised with that. But this 9-10 range where Bijan and Josh Jacobs are, there are a couple other players that I would rather have if this were my draft today and these were the top 10 players taken in the first round. I wouldn't want Jacobs or Bijan at 9 and 10 if I was sitting there. So
for mine, it's different. I do agree that Josh Jacobs firmly should not belong in the top 10, let alone at 7. So for me, it's a different ranking, but it's obviously these 10 players, so there's overlap here. I'd put Barkley number 1. I'm big in love with Saquon, and then I would go Jeff and Chase. Again, I'm a running back guy, but I would definitely see the value in the safety of Jeff and Chase as my 2 and 3. Number 4 is McCaffrey for me. Number 5 is Kelce. Number 6 would be Taylor, then Ekeler, then Bijan, because I think Bijan at 7 is going to win you leagues. And there's a good chance you're going to be able to get him in the second round. I think when it's all said and done, it's going to become very apparent that Algiers is not in the same realm as him, and Robinson's going to be getting the single carries. I mean, this is the guy who made Henry.
Yeah, and I do want to say this about Jamar.
If I'm in a dynasty league, I'm taking Bijan all day, every day.
Bijan is your number 1 in dynasty. I mean, there's no questions asked about that. But I will say this about Jamar Chase. He missed 4 games last year.
I'd still take him 3rd.
And he's still ranked 11.
Yeah, that's what I'm saying. And then I forget where I was at, but I have Kupp at 8, Kupp at 8, the one I forgot, and then Josh Jacobs last. And I do have bigger. I wouldn't have Kupp in my top 10 either. Kupp and Jacobs are by far not my top 10, and it actually doesn't have to do with Kupp's injury. I'm afraid of it's Stafford's. I saw what Ben Roethlisberger was coming off a major injury. They don't recover, and I love Cooper Kupp. I absolutely love the guy, but I don't think he's doing anything this year. And like I said, I just don't think anyone from the Raiders belongs in the top 20.
And you're right. I do feel like that out of the 10 guys that are on this list, the 3 guys that I most likely wouldn't have in the top 10 and would probably take someone from that 11 to 20 range on ESPN are those 3 guys, because I think there is more upside there's more upside to Bijan than to Jacobs and Kupp. But there's just something about me that says, especially after the season Kupp had, I would hope that Stafford could come back, but as we saw when we looked at what the Rams have on the team, the backup quarterback situation is still a mess. The offense is, if Cam Akers can continue to be a guy that we hope that he could be,
that's a drama train.
I mean, this team is definitely in a struggle period. So you don't really want to. It's good to have the best player on a struggling team.
It is.
But you don't really want to have that best player on a struggling team be your number 1 guy. I
mean, if I'm covering the Rams, I'm triple covering Kupp and then just waiting for the other guys to mess up, which is basically what the Rams do. I don't see any stepping up from the Rams that's going to be impressive. And I also don't think Kupp's going to be I don't think Stafford's going to be nearly what it was. So we'll be with you guys tomorrow for 11 through 20. And also, by the way, we are going to do a best ball league, guys. So reach out to us in the comments if you want to be a part of it, because it's going to be something that's going to be very fun, and we want to get as many of these going with fan interaction as we can. So if you haven't yet subscribed, click subscribe, and we'll be with you tomorrow.